Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Doug Drysdale about his experience in business development, his transition from crunching numbers to leading deals, and the challenges of a global BD strategy. We also touched on his move from the UK to San Diego, the intricacies of licensing and acquisitions in the pharma industry, and his experiences with Elan, Alpharma, and Actavis. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 2 a listen. In part 3, we talk with Doug about his transition from BD to leading M&A at Actavis, his insights on leveraging debt for acquisitions, and the importance of cultural fit in successful deals. We'll also touch on his strategic acquisitions at Actavis, the turnaround at Norwich Pharmaceuticals and Alvogen, and his challenges and successes at Pernix Therapeutics.
So now you're head of M&A at Actavis. And you mentioned that you're also raising a lot of debt financing, and it sounds like, with that volume of M&A, you're probably interfacing with the capital markets a lot. And yeah. So for those who are, I guess there's 2 questions I have. What makes for a successful M&A transaction in your opinion? And then the next question is kind of similar to my BD question earlier. How does one, particularly a scientist, get into M&A?
Yeah, maybe just take that one first. I mean, I don't know how you jump straight into M&A as a scientist. It's kind of difficult, unless you've started your own company and you're selling it or something.
Yeah.
From my own experience, what I can say is you got to kind of work your way in, start with what you know, focus on that, and then keep adding to your knowledge. I was always driving towards areas that I was unfamiliar with. So I wasn't really familiar with sales early on. I wasn't really familiar with business and finance, tax, or intellectual property, all that stuff. And so I would just go find the information or find people that knew. The great thing about being a business development person is you don't have to be the expert because you're calling on experts. But at the end of the day, you end up becoming pretty knowledgeable because you get all that exposure. It's really, really terrific. I mean, I've always thought that M&A and that BD experience is like CEO training. Right? Because you get to see the business from all angles and what works. And then even on the cultural side, when you're thinking about acquisitions, culture really matters. And people often think that M&A folks are very just transactional, but you really have to understand how it's all going to fit together and have the vision for it. I've seen plenty of opportunities where the culture would never work, and I know I would say out of the 15 acquisitions, 14 were great, which is a pretty good.
That's pretty a good hit rate. Yeah, that's a good hit rate.
And the last one was just okay, right? It wasn't quite what we expected, but that's a pretty good hit rate. And much of it comes from being just very, very clear about what you want, and trying to conform things to get a deal done doesn't really work. It's got to fit your criteria. And then, as I say, making decisions very quickly, picking the leadership, empowering that leadership to find and identify the synergies, set goals for those synergies, the amounts you're going to save and pull out, and by when, and then have a regular project meetings to keep that on track. And it was really important for us to do that because we were using debt, not equity. So we were leveraging ourselves to buy these companies. We couldn't buy the next one, right, until we had deleveraged and pulled out some synergies. So we were constantly deleveraging. So our deals were always about pulling out synergies. So that means efficiencies or adding revenues, or it means we were extrapolating our pipeline into new markets, and so that made the whole pipeline more efficient. Lots of different ways of doing it, but I think knowing absolutely what you want to achieve up front, and making sure the management on both sides is aligned with that, then move on to the next one.
Amazing. And for the listeners out there, I think in terms of our audience, I believe they may not be as familiar with these strategies of like delevering, raising credit, and doing. Can you talk a little bit about raising credit facilities to kind of facilitate this M&A activity, and like who are the folks that you generally talk to when you do these things, and what exactly is that process like?
Yeah, it's a math problem, really, right? And so it's pretty formulaic. So in general, as a public company back then, we would be comfortable borrowing 3 to 4 times our earnings, EBITDA. And that's pretty much all we could borrow at reasonable rates. Going beyond that, it starts to get more expensive. The rates go up. But we were a public company, and we were trading at, I think, 16, 17, 18 times earnings. And so if we were acquiring companies for 7 or 8 times earnings, as soon as they were part of us, that EBITDA was trading at 16 to 18 times. So we were doubling the value of those companies overnight, and that was a big factor. And then, of course, pulling out synergies as well. We were able to get the total net leverage back down to something reasonable, normally within a year, something like that.
Amazing.
So it's definitely a math problem.
Yep.
Then it's also a legal problem as well. There's lots of lawyers
Yeah.
involved. I think at one time we had 26 banks in our lending syndicate.
Oh.
So you're having to deal with all that complexity. And when you always you have to commit to maybe not doing any more deals for a while. Then of course 3 months later we'd have another one. We'd have to go back and ask for a waiver over. It's there's lots of complexity. You definitely need good lawyers and accountants around you.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I think a lot of like life sciences, particularly in the early stage, are primarily familiar with raising equity. And as you start to become a larger publicly traded company, the tool set of financing really opens up to you. And you have like, broadly syndicated loans or, whatever structure you might be. And it's like very fancy now. And it is only getting more fancy. So it's really interesting to hear how one executes on this strategy and manages that, particularly with so many, 15 acquisitions, a lot. And so as you are, kind of executing this strategy, what were some like memorable challenges and triumphs for your time at Actavis?
Okay, so a number of really interesting and exciting acquisitions that happened. One was kind of a multi-stage vision. We didn't have any oncology capabilities, so we acquired a small oncology business in Romania, in Bucharest, and small capacity but very high quality, which is really superb. So that gave us some capability, but we needed capacity. So then we did another deal to buy a facility from Pfizer in Milan, in Italy. And we basically got that for pennies on the dollar because they wanted to walk away from the facility. So this enormous oncology facility. It basically gave us, I think, the largest lyophilization capacity globally of any generics company overnight. And then what we did is we took all those product pipeline from the Bucharest facility, scaled it in Italy, and then it became $1 billion oncology business. And we had spent maybe 200 million between.
Oh my God.
So it was, but that just took some vision to say, well, we're going to put the pieces together, and some patience, because it takes time, to do that scaling. But we needed to be, we had transitioned our M&A priorities from, initially they were expanding geographies. So because we were taking this massive pipeline we had and pushing it out to many geographies as possible. So we were, at the beginning, mostly acquiring marketing businesses, distribution businesses, so we could push the products out. After a while, when you start to get to 60, 70 countries, that starts to slow. And we needed new areas, new therapeutic areas, and higher margin ones as well. And so that was one, was oncology business. and another was an extended release technology business in Florida that also we spent about 200 million on and became a $1 billion business as well. So,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, those are interesting. I do have an interesting sort of challenge story, if you like.
I'd love to hear it.
All right. So, India, 2005, July in Mumbai. So it's monsoon season, and it was raining a lot. I was with a team. We were out of the city in a manufacturing plant all day, looking around, so not really paying attention to the weather. Came back into the city in a minivan, and the traffic stopped, which is pretty normal for Mumbai. But the rain was coming down really hard, and about 2 hours went by and no movement. And by this time, we were getting kind of impatient, hungry, various other things. It was starting to get a little bit dark, and so nobody wanted to get out of the car and see what was going on because you'd be immediately drenched.
Yeah.
So we all got out and we walked over the overpass and looked down, and there was just flooding as far as you could see. So we weren't going anywhere. Back in the minivan, and at this point, we're all nasty, wet, smelly, and so we had a choice to stay in the minivan overnight, or go find some dry area, somewhere to stay, or at least get to an area where we could get a cab to our hotel or something like that. So we walk up the overpass, we walk down into this waist-high brown water, and we go about a mile to this area where we know there are taxis, but we get there and it's completely flooded. No, nothing's going anywhere. So now we're a mile in. What do we do? And so we had people with us that knew the city. So we thought, okay, well, let's just walk to our hotel, and if we find somewhere to stay on the way, we'll just do that. But we ended up walking 17 and a half miles over I think 7.5 hours, something like that, in waist-high brown water. It was
my God,
quite an experience.
Oh my God, that sounds horrible. Just like absolutely horrible.
It was the best team building exercise.
Yeah, you start to learn quickly how people act under kind of duress. Like it sounds like
they were all great. They were all great. Everyone was fine. It's all scary at times.
Yeah,
but we made it. But yeah, it wasn't very pleasant.
Yeah, it wasn't very pleasant. I can't imagine. And something that you said about the Pfizer facility acquisition really stood out to me. And I think I'm always fascinated by kind of like M&A strategy and when opportunities like this come about and finding unconventional ways. I mean, I'm going to imagine because you have such a wealth of experience over a diverse set of disciplines, you're kind of like connecting dots like all the time and seeing something in Italy opportunistically come up and you're like, hey, we can like plug this in and make it work. I guess the first question is, how do you find opportunistic investment opportunities like that? And like, what is something that you should keep an eye out for, if you're in an M&A role like that? I'm going to guess, was it like a strategic change for Pfizer where there's like, I guess we're just divesting of this product line or R&D like effort. Like, how do you find opportunities, and when do you know like that's the one?
Yeah, I mean, so we had a whole team that was looking for deals all the time, and different kinds of deals. So one over here might be, something in development. Over here might be some real estate or some other manufacturing capability. And so folks within different teams are always looking because we were a deal-making company. And so we were always filling the funnel. But because we were known consolidators, people were always coming to us as well. So we had just a big network of connections with bankers and other companies. BD, business development departments in pharma companies all talk to each other all the time. And so we just had a big deal flow. Look, sometimes manufacturing facilities become available. We didn't have that in the plan when we bought the Bucharest facility, right? We knew we had a capacity challenge in the future, but it was high quality, so we knew we could solve that problem at some point in the future. The Pfizer facility, I think they had a product that went off patent, and so they didn't need that facility anymore. And so for them, it was just a lot of real estate they didn't need to carry. And for us, it was just a great opportunity. It was probably bigger than we needed, honestly.
Yes.
But it was a village. You needed the car to drive around the thing. It was really, really huge. But it worked. It worked for us.
Very interesting. And so now, you have gone obviously a ton of reps under your belt for, M&A activity, and, you're kind of wrapping up your time at Actavis. How did you find your way at Norwich?
Yeah, so interesting sort of end to the Actavis story for me was we had been massively successful, no doubt about it, just finding a way to really cleverly leverage ourselves and deleverage constantly to grow the business. And we were now trading at a healthy multiple. We were buying companies at 7 or 8 times earnings, and we were trading at 16, 18 times. That model was working. But although we were public, we had a chairman who owned 39% of the company, and he wanted all the rest. Well, to get the rest, you've got to be paying more than that 16, 18 times that we're trading at. So he did that. He tendered for the rest of the shares, bought the rest of the company, took it private. But then it was just massively leveraged because he had all the debt to buy those shares went into the company. So suddenly, as a head of M&A, there was no more fuel. Right? There was no more gasoline to go and help do any more deals. So it was just a natural time because the path of the company clearly changed at that point, and had to shift more internally to organic stuff because of the balance sheet. So it was just time to go do something else. And so I was approached by some private equity guys, a small New York firm, who had just acquired Norwich Pharmaceuticals. Norwich was an old Procter & Gamble manufacturing facilities in upstate New York. Pretty intimidating when you first walk up to it. It's 375,000 square feet on 400 acres. It's a big facility. Employed at that time maybe 500 people in a 5,000 person town. So it's very important to the town, unionized. But it was underutilized. And these private equity folks had bought it for pennies on the dollar. They were manufacturing drugs for other companies, so they were doing contract manufacturing. And the idea was, let's fix this facility to make it efficient and profitable. And 2, let's use the capabilities to create our own pharma company. So we'll sell our spare capacity to others to pay the bills, pay the overhead, but let's develop our own products and start another company. And that was Alvogen. So essentially, I had that job was really fun. It was two companies I was running. So one was this manufacturing business, very local, its own issues, unionized, all of that stuff, where we had to reduce the headcount quite significantly over time. We had to bring in automation. We had to build R&D capabilities. There weren't any R&D capabilities there. And then at the same time, as we were downsizing heads there, we were increasing heads in Alvogen, but they were just different skill sets. We were automating the manufacturing, but then we were adding R&D and scientists and building in our R&D facilities. And so that took a while to ramp. It takes a few years, but ultimately we took it from inception to about $500 million in revenues in 5 years, and into 35 countries as well. And we focused Alvogen on these specialty, difficult, complex, generic products with limited competition, so high margin stuff. It was great. We had a lot of people from Actavis came and joined us along the way as well. So terrific team. And great memories from that. And
at Norwich Alvogen, was this strategy primarily organic growth, or was it also an inorganic growth M&A strategy?
Yeah, there really wasn't too much M&A. We did a little bit of M&A in the end in a few Asian markets. And we certainly did a lot of partnering licensing to accelerate the pipeline. If someone's already ahead, why start yourself? So it was a mix of licensing and then organic, doing things in-house. A lot of the products we were focused on were Paragraph 4 products, so they are navigating through the IP landscape, right? So you're not treading on anyone's toes, and to do that, you have to be able to be. You've got to be very nimble from a development point of view and very fast, because the value of the assets depended upon getting to market first with some exclusivity, and it's only the first filer that gets that exclusivity. So we had to be taking the most difficult products and being the fastest. So it was quite a hurdle, what you said, but some really good ROI on some of those projects.
That's amazing. And as you're reflecting on the Norwich Alvogen experience, what were some key lessons or takeaways that you personally take with you from that kind of era?
It was really all about the team, I would say, because at this time, I'd done much of this before. We had a massive machine at Actavis that was filing something like 900 ANDAs a year equivalent globally. So we knew how to build those regulatory machines. We knew how to develop products. We knew how to build operations. So it was really about bringing the right team of people together. And I think that's honestly, and with Cybin now where I am too, is the key to every success I've been involved with, I think. And it's just having a culture that's very entrepreneurial, and a culture that's very open to change. Because one thing that's certain in any growing company is that it's going to change, and change a lot. So I think that was really enjoyable to me, being at Alvogen. It was almost a point where I could relax a little bit, because I kind of done it before, and so it was a little easier that time around.
Absolutely. It's interesting when I have conversations with like kind of folks who this is their like not their first rodeo. It's kind of like I take all those experiences from the first rodeo, wouldn't change a thing about it, but I don't necessarily want to go back to that exact same experience.
Right.
I'm glad to go into to do this like from a second, third time, and now I can kind of have a little bit more kind of I'm not so deep into it and like everything is on the line, hair on fire. So that's really interesting here. And something that you said too is that is incredibly important to me, and I think is the key to it all is the people. And even in the organic, so Alvogen, I'm seeing kind of like in the kind of organic growth, and then Actavis being more of the kind of inorganic growth. Irrespective of where you find your growth, it's always the people. And I think exactly what you said about kind of when you were at Actavis is like going in before you close the transaction, you need to know like, is there going to be a people fit? And if you don't, it's just like organ rejection. You're just like,
yeah. I mean, also ultimately, you end up making difficult choices later, and it becomes expensive because time gets wasted, things don't get done, projects don't succeed. It just sort of doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you can't make the culture work. I mean, obviously, not every culture is a fit with another, but you can put in people and systems and infrastructures to kind of bring people together and integrate them, if you know that there's a need to do that. But yeah, it's always about the people, always.
Yeah, and I think sometimes in science, the sciences that we can think is just like, if the science is sound, that's all it's gonna like. That's it. But people forget that it's like there are people behind the science, and to work collaboratively, there needs to be at least like some sort of like cultural glue to it.
It also makes you a lot more productive as well. I mean, I can tell you that at Cybin we have 55-ish people, 55 to 60. Our nearest competitors each have 170, 190, and we're getting the same, at least maybe more, done with fewer folks, because it's the right team, and you don't need to have all the peripheral sort of space fillers, and just people know what they want to do, and they work well together. So, I mean, we're obviously getting a lot of value out of that culture.
Absolutely, and I think part of that culture we find at Exceeder too is like we always say we're a small but mighty team, but there's like when you have like, in my opinion, what's a big part of like a good culture is this like trust, and when there's trust, you can kind of just move quickly because you're not second guessing what your teammate is handing to you. You're like, we're sound, we can keep going, versus like having to like open it back up and be like, all right, and not trusting what gets on your desk. So I love hearing that.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Trust is the most powerful tool, because when I see cultures that don't work, it's generally about mistrust, and if someone's trying to take my job, someone's trying to get promoted, this person's out for themselves. And when that behavior starts to happen, the trust falls apart, and then everyone's second guessing, and work gets redone and rechecked and all of that. So you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. It's totally trust.
Yeah, and it also that the distrust also can spread within an organization very quickly too. And so like I've always found that it's just like, if there's you got to make sure you take care of that like first and foremost all the time. And if there's like a level of kind of distrust you can kind of see seeding, it's just like making sure to like kind of quell that and make sure that the team is like fully meshed.
Well, I mean, as a leader and leaders, if you lose trust, it's really hard to get it back, as you know. So.
Yeah, and it takes ages to build it up. Like it takes ages to build up your reputation and everyone just knowing about you. And I think it's like what Warren Buffett always says is just like a lifetime to build trust and a moment to just lose it.
Right.
And and I don't think that's an exaggeration at all. And so now you're wrapping up your time at Alvogen. How did you find your way to Pernix?
So at Alvogen, as I said, it kind of got to the point, we had this rapid growth over 5 years. We were in 35 countries. We had lots of parallel infrastructure because we were growing fast, and it's easier to grow fast with local management rather than centralized. It was time to centralize stuff. It was, I don't want to say I was in cruise control, but a little bit like that. It wasn't as interesting. This opportunity came up at Pernix, kind of a roundabout sort of networking way. I learned about this company that was struggling. They were a mix of a cough and cold business, so very seasonal revenues. Most of the sales were in the south, and there were not a lot up north. Excuse me. They had made one acquisition too many, where they just overpaid that acquisition. So as a result of that, their stock was in trouble. They were NASDAQ-listed, and so it was an opportunity to jump into a turnaround of a public company. So I hadn't run a public company before at that point, and I hadn't really had to deal with a turnaround, apart from Norwich, but that was just really one manufacturing site. So we came in, we brought in some investors, brought some capital into the company, politely asked the board to resign, and most of the management team as well. We divested a manufacturing facility. We shut down 2 distribution centers. We shut down 3 or 4 offices. All this infrastructure wasn't needed. Acquired a product from GSK, acquired another one from Zogenix, built a 250-person sales team, and became a CNS company. Wow. We were EBITDA positive first quarter after jumping in, and we took the enterprise value from 80 million to about 800 million in the first year. It was a big transition and turnaround, and a lot of fun, because a lot of the growth and building was in sales and marketing. So building sales teams, marketing, sales operations, analytics, all the back office behind that, financial stuff. But it was, we had some great people and a terrific time doing it.
Holy moly.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Doug Drysdale. Tune in to part 4 of our conversation to learn more about his journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Biotech Startups podcast for part 4 of Doug's story. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Actavis. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exedr.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.